Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we are witnessing the end of an era that reshapes history, redraws power, and redefines what the world believed was permanent. After years of occupation, uncertainty, and global tension, Crimea has returned to Ukraine. This moment is not just a military outcome, not just a political statement, but a historical shift that will echo for generations. What once seemed impossible has become reality, and the consequences of this transformation extend far beyond the borders of Eastern Europe. For more than a decade, Crimea stood as a symbol of unresolved injustice. Its occupation in 2014 marked one of the most controversial moments in modern geopolitics. International law was challenged, borders were altered by force, and the world responded with condemnation but limited action. Over time, many believed that Crimea's fate was sealed, that it would remain frozen in geopolitical limbo, permanently under Russian control. Yet history has a way of surprising those who assume it has reached its final chapter. Ukraine never accepted the loss. Even during its darkest moments, when resources were scarce and survival itself was uncertain, the idea of reclaiming Crimea remained alive. It lived in political speeches, in school textbooks, in national memory, and in the hearts of millions of Ukrainians. The peninsula was not just land, it was identity, sovereignty, and justice deferred. While the world debated feasibility, Ukraine prepared patiently, methodically, and quietly. The path to Crimea's return was not built overnight. It was forged through years of sacrifice, adaptation, and resilience. Ukraine transformed its military from a struggling post-Soviet force into a modern, flexible fighting structure capable of complex operations. Training standards improved, intelligence sharing deepened, and battlefield experience hardened an entire generation of soldiers. The war became a brutal teacher, and Ukraine learned faster than anyone expected. Meanwhile, Russia's grip on Crimea, while outwardly strong, was slowly weakening beneath the surface. Maintaining control over the peninsula required enormous resources. Supply routes were long and vulnerable, morale among troops fluctuated, and international isolation strained economic and military sustainability. Crimea depended heavily on logistical lifelines, and once those lifelines began to crack, the illusion of permanence started to fade. The turning point came not with a single dramatic announcement, but through a series of calculated moves that reshaped the battlefield. Ukrainian forces targeted logistics, command centers, and infrastructure with precision. Ammunition depots exploded far behind enemy lines. Air defense systems were neutralized, naval assets were pushed back or destroyed. Each strike sent a clear message: nowhere was untouchable anymore. Crimea, once considered a fortress, began to feel exposed. Ukrainian drones flew deeper, striking airfields and radar stations. Electronic warfare disrupted communications. Russian forces found themselves increasingly isolated, unsure of what was happening beyond their immediate surroundings. The psychological impact was immense. Control is not just about weapons, it is about confidence, and that confidence was eroding rapidly. At the same time, the world was watching closely. International support for Ukraine had already reshaped the conflict, but Crimea represented a new threshold. Governments understood that whatever happened there would define future global norms. Would territorial conquest by force finally be reversed in the modern era? Would international law prove more than symbolic? As Ukraine advanced, diplomatic language shifted. What was once cautious became firm. What was once theoretical became imminent. Inside Crimea, the population endured a moment of uncertainty unlike any before. Years of occupation had created fear, silence, and suppression, but it had not erased memory. Ukrainian flags hidden for years emerged again. Quiet acts of resistance grew bolder. Information flowed despite censorship. Many civilians sensed that something irreversible was unfolding. The air felt different. History was moving. When Ukrainian forces finally approached Crimea's key access points, the world held its breath. Analysts warned of escalation, of red lines, of catastrophic consequences. But reality unfolded differently. Instead of a decisive last stand, Russian defenses crumbled unevenly. Units withdrew, abandoned equipment, or surrendered. Command structures fractured. Orders became confused. The once feared presence dissolved into disorganization. One of the most symbolic moments came as Ukrainian forces entered major Crimean cities. Streets that had long echoed with imposed authority now filled with cautious hope. Civilians watched from windows, unsure whether to believe their eyes. When Ukrainian flags were raised, tears followed, not just of joy, but of relief. Relief that survival had not been meaningless. Relief that silence had not erased truth. Sevastopol, the heart of Russian naval power in the Black Sea, became the ultimate symbol of this transformation. For years, it represented Russia's strategic dominance. But as Ukrainian control expanded, the city's military significance shifted dramatically. Naval assets retreated or were disabled. Ports fell silent. A symbol of occupation became a symbol of collapse. The psychological impact on Russia was profound. Losing Crimea was not just losing territory. It was losing narrative, prestige, and perceived inevitability. Globally, reactions were immediate and intense. Some nations hailed the event as a victory for international law and sovereignty. Others expressed concern over stability and escalation. Markets reacted. Security alliances reassessed strategies. Military academies began studying the campaign in real time. The return of Crimea forced the world to confront a powerful lesson. Even in an age of nuclear deterrence and globalized power, determination and strategy still matter. For Ukraine, this moment marked the culmination of immense sacrifice. Cities destroyed, lives lost, families displaced. Nothing could erase the cost. But reclaiming Crimea gave meaning to that suffering. It reaffirmed that Ukraine's struggle was not in vain, that resistance could lead to restoration, and that national unity could overcome overwhelming odds. The emotional weight of the moment cannot be overstated. This was not just a victory, it was validation. The Crimean Tatars, long marginalized and persecuted, experienced a particularly powerful resurgence. Their cultural and political rights, suppressed for years, became central to reintegration efforts. Celebrations were mixed with remembrance, hope blended with caution. Freedom had returned, but rebuilding trust and community would take time. Ukraine faced not only the task of reconstruction, but of reconciliation. Reintegration began almost immediately. Administrative systems were restored, Ukrainian law reintroduced, and public services reconnected. Schools reopened with Ukrainian curricula. Media outlets resumed independent broadcasting. Infrastructure repairs started despite ongoing challenges. The work ahead was enormous, but the foundation was clear. Crimea was home again. Internationally, the consequences continued to ripple outward. Russia faced the largest strategic loss of the modern era. Its global image shifted from feared power to weakened aggressor. Internally, questions arose about leadership, decision making, and future direction. Externally, alliances recalibrated. NATO reassessed deterrence strategies. Smaller nations watched closely, reassured that borders are not merely suggestions. The return of Crimea also redefined modern warfare. The campaign demonstrated the effectiveness of drones, intelligence integration, precision strikes, and psychological operations. It showed that static defenses are vulnerable in a dynamic battlefield. It highlighted how information, morale, and legitimacy can be as decisive as tanks and missiles. Military thinkers around the world took notes. Yet beyond strategy and politics, the most enduring legacy of Crimea's return lies in human resilience, in families reunited after years apart, in children growing up without fear of imposed identity, in communities rediscovering their voice. History is often written through leaders and armies, but it is lived by ordinary people. And for the people of Crimea, this chapter marked a return not just to a nation, but to dignity. The end of this era does not mean the end of challenges. Ukraine still faces reconstruction, security risks, and diplomatic complexity. The global order remains fragile, but something fundamental has changed. The idea that occupation can become permanent has been challenged. The belief that might makes right has been shaken. A precedent has been set. As the Ukrainian flag flies once again over Crimea, the message to the world is unmistakable. History is not fixed. Borders are not decided by force alone, and nations that refuse to surrender their identity can alter the course of the future. This moment will be debated, studied, and remembered, not just as a military event, but as a turning point in global consciousness. The era that began in 2014 has ended. A new chapter has opened. And as the world adjusts to this reality, one truth stands firm. Crimea's return to Ukraine is not just the end of an era. It is the beginning of a new one. Thank you for watching. If you want more deep analysis on global conflicts and historical turning points, don't forget to subscribe, like the video, and share your thoughts in the comments. Stay informed, stay aware, and we'll see you in the next one.